Hi, my name is Rich Baker, and this is Improv Breakdown.
You improvise like a man. And I said, thank you. And they said, it wasn't a compliment. And I said, and yet I chose to take it as such. So
Hell yeah. Oh my God.
like,
Wow.
Yeah. Many different things.
My hands. It's like
That was it. What suggestion? I was that. Welcome to Improv Breakdown. With me today is teacher performer Laura McGhee. Thanks so much for being on the show, Laura. It's so good to see you.
oh, it's so good to see you too, Rich.
So how long have you been teaching comedy at this point?
Over 25 years.
25 years, my God.
It's so weird because I look so young, right? It's shocking.
You do. You absolutely. When did you start when you were 4?
I'm equally good at eliciting compliments as teaching.
That's fine by me. I'll dole them out all day. You earned them. You deserve them. So you started out in Canada, and now you're in Los Angeles, California. Can you talk about the differences between comedy in Canada versus comedy down here?
Well, I think for Canadians, their genesis is British comedy. And my family came from a British background. So it's definitely perhaps a little more observational, maybe a little more cerebral. Mm-hmm. Canadians are a little shyer about expressing their opinions in their comedy, I think, sometimes.
Okay. All right. Fair.
In Canada, well, let's put it this way. In Canada, I was always the loudest person in the room. Without
Sometimes
exception.
you are still the loudest person in the room,
Right?
to be fair.
Just saying a lot.
You came down and we're like, I got this.
Oh, this is my jam. These are my people.
Yeah. There's no quiet Canadians here. I love it.
But I like that because then when I came here, Americans tend to be sort of, for the most part, a little more confident in their own skin, I think, and more willing to take risks.
Okay.
Which, when you ask for a volunteer in a Canadian audience, it usually takes about 10 minutes to entice.
Really?
Whereas Americans are like, sure, I'll do that. What's the worst that can happen?
So,
it's only 4 years.
So did, because, we get audience volunteers quite a lot in improv, like, did you have to develop like different skills to work in Canada that you don't need down here?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I was able to learn teaching Canada was to be a really sort of warm, encouraging persona when I taught. Because if Canadians are dealt with too harshly or they feel discouraged, they tend to curl up in a ball.
I have, I've never taken your class per se because we're contemporaries, but I have heard from so many students at the Second City Hollywood about how you are just the most encouraging, positive source of glowing like positivity that they've had in their whole run of teachers. I am not that guy. I'm not that glowing source of positivity.
That's what's so awesome about teaching is you benefit from all kinds of different teaching styles.
Yeah, and so like. Your style, like as I hear about it from others, and tell me if this jives with your experience, is very much like a soft place to land. Everyone's doing great, just like in cheerleading kind of energy. Is that fair?
Sometimes depends on the person.
Okay, that's fair.
If I have to characterize myself, I always say I'm the nicest woman in the world until I'm not. And sometimes I have to not be. It depends on how students react to me. Yeah. Because you have to ultimately, as an instructor, you have to maintain control of the classroom and what's going on in there. And there's always someone that pushes back, sometimes a little too hard. And it's always such a delightful moment to see the look of shock in their face when they realize that they've done that. And there's going to be repercussions.
Right. Talk about that. You've been teaching for 25 years. Clearly, I assume that there's been an evolution in as far as how you deal with that kind of pushback, like in the beginning versus how you do it now. Can you talk about like the difference?
Well, I think when you're less experienced, and again, I'm so grateful to have so many years experience because every time you think you've encountered every possible scenario in teaching that you could possibly encounter, something new comes down the pike.
Fair, yeah.
And guy with no pants, that's new. Okay.
What? Haven't dealt with that one yet.
One of my favorites in the last few years was someone brought their stoned roommate, to audit the class, and that was an interesting.
This is Dave. He just wants to sit here and kind of look at us. That cool? No, it's not cool. How did you handle that?
He was very gently escorted out.
Sir, you need to go this way. Okay,
This
okay.
way. Yes, and turn to your right, please.
Oh my
It's
God.
good because I think, as you said, you always have difficult circumstances to deal with as an improv teacher, and I think probably improv more so than other subject areas that teachers deal with, because you're asking people to operate on their right brain, to be creative, to relax, certain censorship mechanisms that may be in place so that they make things up on the spot.
Yeah.
So situations will arise. It's inevitable, So it's hard when you're a new teacher because you haven't learned, you don't have the tools in your toolkit yet to deal with certain situations. So sometimes it's trial by fire. I'm always, when I was first starting out, I was always extremely open to resourcing other instructors with more experience than me, asking their opinions about things, especially if I wasn't sure how to deal with something. And then as you get more experience under your belt and you deal with different scenarios, you start to learn what works and what doesn't. I'm a big fan of talking things out. I don't like to censor. I don't like to quell things, because in real performances in real life, you don't have a pause button. So I would rather disseminate subject areas and deal with it. And I've had some doozies over the years. I've had one death threat, which is pretty good.
Jeez.
Relatively speaking.
That's teaching improv.
That's pretty
a
good, right? For 25 years?
I guess only one.
Only the one.
I'm going to guess that was in the U.S. versus Canada.
No, it was in Canada.
It was in Canada. Okay, great.
Yeah, a guy threatened to run me down in the parking lot in his car because I wouldn't put his 10-minute scene about Kennedy being killed by aliens into a sketch program.
I mean, that does warrant death now that I think about it. I guess he was on the right side of history.
He withdrew the scene in protest, artistic protest. So we were all the poorer for it, Rich. We really were.
Yeah, the world really lost a gem there. Can you talk about this, like, as far as improv or comedy in general, in 25 years, how have you, because I feel like I've seen a lot of changes, but what have you seen, either whether it's Canadian-centric, US-centric, or just in your experience? How is comedy different now?
It definitely goes through cycles. When I first started, a lot of it was racist, misogynistic, very broad, shticky kind of humor. Actually, one of the reasons I started writing is I got tired of playing wives and waitresses in scenes. So you can imagine.
Good for you.
And then it went through a regenesis rather, where it started to get smarter and just more variety, which I really, really enjoyed. There was a certain empowerment of groups that hadn't felt empowered. I really noticed the difference teaching women. When I first started teaching in Toronto, I would have these lovely ladies show up for my class, and it was ladies' night out, and they would show up with perfect hair and makeup and their skinny jeans and heels. And afterwards, they would go for Cosmos at the bar around the corner. And they never wanted to do anything that wasn't a seduction scene. Every scene was a seduction scene. They never wanted to do anything that made them look physically unattractive or take risks. And it was really discouraging as an instructor. Because I usually look like I roll out of a ditch within about the first 10 minutes of any improv class I took.
And yet you still look fabulous.
Thank you. I think I played a dog in my first improv scene ever.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it. I remember, I think it was my first year teaching. I had a class where it was a lot of floor work. And I told people ahead of time, I was like, wear sweats or workout clothes or something, because we're going to get sweaty and whatnot. And I, now that you say it, I do remember that there was a few women in the class who just kind of basically refused. They're like, I'll show up in a skirt and I will not get on the floor. And I'm like, okay. But like nowadays, no one can, like everyone's like, floor, let's get on the floor.
And I'll mime smoke the shit out of that cigarette in that film noir scene, but that's it.
Am I seducing you on the floor? Because that's all I'm doing.
And that seems to have evolved. Like now, I really noticed it in maybe the last 10 years that I started to get women who are a lot more assertive and larger risk takers and more confident. And that was just so exciting to see. I can't even tell you.
Well, and I would say that clearly you had to have a lot of influence in that because you're so confident and you put it out there and you don't, like when you do comedy, you don't give a damn about like looking prim and proper. You go all out. And
I hope so. I mean, that's probably part of my learning process as well as I went along. I remember once I was doing a show with Second City and someone came up to me after the show and they didn't mean this as a compliment. They said, "You improvise like a man." And I said, "Thank you." And they said, "It wasn't a compliment." And I said, "And yet I chose to take it as such." So
hell yeah. Oh my God. Oh, Laura McGhee, you're so fierce. I love it. Unbelievable. So like, I'm sure we could talk all day about what advice you could give to people, but like, could you just pick like one quintessential piece of advice that if I'm an improviser, whether I'm brand new or early on, like what would you tell me right now?
Well, I mean, there's your basic foundational tenets of improv, which, you have to be a good listener and collaborate and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that I see often missing that I like to ingrain from the first moment I teach people is, what are you trying to say with your material? Yeah. What is your opinion? How do you feel about things? Because it drives whatever you do in comedy. And artists are conduits for communication. So my take is, why are you doing it? Why are you here? What are you saying if you don't have a purpose? Because it's an opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity. And of course, my slant is always any scene that I'm in is going to be have a feminist slant or say something that I don't like about government it's the nature of satire, isn't it? Yeah. And it's amazing when you give people that dictum, how much their material improves, because suddenly they have an objective in scenes. Suddenly they have characters. Suddenly they're not at a loss for words. It's a really, really cool transformation to see.
I love that we're conduits for communication. Yeah, and comedy is really just kind of like, here's your lesson wrapped in, an easy a dessert, or so it's like comedy. I feel like is the lubricant that can get the message into people's minds.
Absolutely. I mean, you always see I call them civilians. You always see civilians complaining on social media, that actors and performers shouldn't be communicating their opinions, political or otherwise, on social media. They should just act or perform and, keep their mouth shut. I'm like, all right, well then if I'll do it through my medium, that's my opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never understood that. Like, why should anyone keep their mouth shut? Like, don't we have free speech here? Like, you're an actor, so you're not allowed to talk. Like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There's a lot of fun people out there. At one point, you were a performer and not a teacher, and then you transitioned to being a performer and a teacher. Can you talk about what it was like to go from not being a teacher to being a teacher?
Well, the first couple months are always it's always baptism by fire, isn't it? It was the same when I started flight instructing, where you're just like, I hope people don't really know that I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
I'm just gonna posture like hell. It's intimidating, isn't it? I mean, because that's a big transition to go from the mentee to the mentor. Yeah. And one of the things I was always worried about the first couple months was getting called on something that I didn't have enough knowledge about or enough experience to disseminate. And I was always really honest about it. If I didn't know something, I would say, I'm going to get back to you on that. But I would also try to really emphasize the role of mentor in that dynamic, because I almost always had more life experience than the people I'm teaching, because I'm old. So
yet you look amazing.
I love the reincorporation of that. That's clever structurally. We clearly have done this professionally.
I calls them like I sees them. What did you know you wanted to be a teacher at some point? And like, did you intentionally go after that goal, or was it kind of something that landed in your lap?
I think so. I think I went after it because once I left the company in Toronto, I did a lot of corporate work for them initially, and I didn't really enjoy the corporate work. I found it a little bit soul-sucking, to be honest.
Sure.
I didn't, and it was hard because sometimes you would show up and, I mean, the deck was just stacked against you. There was no way that it was an appropriate show for whatever, the client was. I found them quite stressful. I didn't enjoy them. But I really enjoyed mentoring people, and I really enjoyed sharing information. And clearly, I'm incredibly passionate about the art form. And I thought, well, the people that I've loved to learn from have those qualities. So maybe I can use them to help other people.
I'm assuming because, you toured and you were you were on the main stage of Toronto, right?
No, I was in the touring company.
You were in the touring company.
I got fired from the touring company because I refused to audition for main stage after I'd been in the touring company for 3 years. And they said, would you like to come audition? And I said, I've been auditioning for the last 3 years. And they said, we're not renewing your contract. And I went, okay, bye.
Wow, weird.
Second City.
I also have a story of how Second City fired me from being a performer. I think,
and I love it. I do love it there, but I think everyone has not had a very smooth, level road in their path through that place.
Yeah, it's rocky. So good on you. But from being a touring performer and then doing the corporate stuff, was teaching just kind of like, oh yeah, right this way. If you want a class, you got it, kind of thing, or did you have to fight for it?
No, I really had to fight for it. In Toronto, it's a smaller talent pool. Mm-hmm. So as far as students go, so there aren't as many classes. And what they tend to do is, if you have a Tuesday night class at 7 p.m., you have that class that day, that time for the rest of your life.
Oh.
So it's hard for new people to break in. So I subbed quite a bit, and I did some specialty workshops. I can't remember actually if I ever had a regular day. I don't think I'd gotten that far by the time I decided to relocate to LA. But I taught a lot of corporate workshops, and those ones I actually enjoyed. I didn't enjoy doing the shows, but I really enjoyed doing the workshops because you'd show up and, you'd get frightened, pharmaceutical reps cowering in the corner at the beginning of your 2 hours. And by the end of the 2 hours, they were up on stage doing a Beyonce impression. Like, it was an amazing, transformative event. And I would inevitably have someone come up to me and go, I've worked here for 30 years and this is the best day of work I've ever had. And I'm like, oh,
hell yes.
Okay. And then they go, how do I get on to Saturday Night Live? I'm like, well, you just call.
You just give them a call. Oh, you want Lauren's number? Here you go.
I just did a 2-hour workshop with Laura McGhee. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. It's probably too late for this season. You're probably going to have to wait till next season. But
yeah, that's how those conversations go.
The sweet, lovely optimism of people. And then, serves to be right. A year later, I turn on my TV and go, oh, there they are. They got in the cast. Shame on me. Shame on me for not embracing their dream.
Do you still get students now like saying show up to level 1 or whatever and be like, how do I get on SNL? Like, are you still hearing that? Or
yeah, I do. And I get students that want to skip levels because they feel that their skill is higher than their classmates. And people's self-awareness is always a really interesting challenge as a teacher. You run into the people that know exactly what they have to offer and are very, very adept at communicating that. And you get people who are so talented who think that they have nothing to offer, and that always hurts my heart because you constantly need to reassure them that they, have great skills. And then you get the people that, are the other people.
Yep. The others.
But honestly, they're always fascinating to me as well, because it's amazing how far you can get on believing in yourself and confidence. I'm constantly surprised and shocked by that. and not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. You realize as a performer how much that makes up what you have to offer the industry as a package.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I said I should never negate someone with perhaps a little lesser ability, but good salesmanship.
Right.
It's just as important.
Yeah, well, and what I always tell students is that, like, your ability is the thing that you're here to grow, right? Like, if you're not able right now, that's fine. Like, keep doing the work. But yeah, that confidence is something that no matter how good you are, if you don't have that confidence, that's I feel like no one gets on to Saturday Night Live or anything that's majorly worth talking about by like humbly shouting like, oh, I guess if you want to let me audition, you know. I feel like we have to have that bravado to some point, right?
Yeah, you can't sit there waiting for the phone to ring, can you?
Not well. I mean, I don't know if you ever could, but you certainly can't now.
No.
In addition, you already mentioned this, but in addition to being an improv performer, instructor, and comedian, you are also a pilot.
I am,
Which is not there's not a lot of Venn diagrams that cross over from comedy to pilot that I know of. Did they kind of happen simultaneously in your life, or did one happen from the other? Talk about that, please.
No, actually, I'd been working in the entertainment industry probably for about 20 years when I didn't take my first flight lesson until I was 39. And it was a birthday present because I used to always ask people to buy me gifts of experience. I enjoyed those more than material gifts. And I flew once and went, oh, this is kind of cool. I think I'm going to do this now. And it was originally just a hobby, and then it kind of ramped out of control. And what I liked about it was so diametrically opposed to the skills that I needed as a performer and a writer. It was very left brain. And I feel like my left brain hadn't been used as much over the last 20 years, so I had to reacquaint myself with it, and I had to work a lot harder than most pilots to get where I went. What I also liked about it, which I'm sure you can relate to, as someone who works in the entertainment industry, you work so hard all the time, and sometimes the rewards are not commensurate with the effort, which can be frustrating.
Yeah.
In aviation, that's not so much the case. If you work really hard and you apply yourself and you have ability, you will progress. And that took some of the pressure off my entertainment career and actually helped my self-esteem and my feelings of self-worth and all that stuff that performers struggle with. And it was also really interesting because generally, if I'm teaching an improv class, and if I tend to have attitude problems at all from students, it tends sometimes to be young white males who don't think that women are funny. Are you shocked to hear that?
Shocked.
And it's amazing how emasculating the announcement that you're an airline pilot in the first 5 minutes of class can be. It usually shuts that shit down really fast.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a boss move, right? I'm not just some comedian. I also fly planes. It's interesting that you talk about like how left brain it is, because you know in comedy, I assume the same point of view is that like you know we have to make mistakes. We have to like, oh, this failed, and that's how we learn. But I'm assuming as a pilot, you gotta like triple check everything.
Yeah, the mistakes are not so easily condoned.
Yeah, right. So that's gotta be a completely different mindset of like I have to make sure this is this, or else we're dead. Kind of thing.
It's interesting because there are transferable skills. Like one of the reasons I think I'm a good pilot. No, I don't think I'm a good pilot. I am a good pilot.
You're a good pilot.
I am a good pilot. Is because I do have superior communication skills that I learned taking improv and teaching improv. So a lot of the training in aviation, they do crew environment training, crew resource training, and they really stress teamwork and listening and communication, which is all the stuff that I already knew how to do from my improv background. So I tend to get along really well with other crew members, and we tend to have good flights. And I know that effective communication is a large part of that. Also, sense of humor really helps because it helps mitigate the stress because it's a very stressful job, and tempers can run high, and you can get into situations and emergencies. And I've had a couple emergencies as a pilot, and I've been proud of how I've handled them. And I really think the stress mitigation of keeping your cool under pressure as a performer and trying to always keep things in perspective really helps.
Oh, fantastic. As a, well, let's just talk about like improv now, I feel like is going through another big change. Maybe it's always going, or I mean, maybe it's always constantly in flux, but it feels to me like this is a focal point of change right now. Do you have any like guesses or insight as to where we're heading and what comedy is going to look like in 5 years or in the future?
Well, the last couple of years, I've really noticed a cognizant change, which has been a new challenge as an instructor based on the political climate in this country right now.
Yeah.
I've taught people based on the government that is in power at the moment, that think that that's given them free license to say or do whatever they like in an improv scene. That's been an interesting challenge. And the pendulum has also swung the other way. I've taught students who are now so sensitive to disenfranchised groups that they're afraid to say or do anything in a scene because they don't want to offend anyone. So that's been an interesting challenge, having those two diametrically opposed factions in the same class.
Yeah.
So my guess would be, based on perhaps a change of leadership in November, that comedy is going to swing very, very PC over the next couple of years. Which will involve people having to work a little bit harder. I always think denigrating comedy is the easiest, laziest kind of comedy. I hate it. So people will have no choice. The people that want to succeed will have to be smarter in their choices, have to be more well-referenced, more evolved. So I actually think comedy could become quite elevated and exciting over the next little while.
I love that, because I feel like, especially when you're saying that when you started out, it was a lot of like misogyny and racism, and just like, it was the easy reference joke to the shittiness that was already happening. Whereas like, in order to do the kind of comedy that is the only thing that's going to pass the muster at this point, is going to be nuanced, very like thoughtful comedy kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's not like, it's not just change in leadership as far as like on the top, but like we're seeing changes in leadership happening like literally like right now, as far as, who's running these institutions. Some institutions are dying and some are, starting afresh. We're seeing everything's happening on Zoom right now, until theaters open back up, and who knows when that'll be. And we're seeing a lot of stuff happen there. What are you noticing about this moment, this really pivotal moment right now?
I think that obviously it's a good thing. My only concern, I was reading something the other day where someone likened a situation that's happening right now to Animal Farm. And that my concern is that the changes don't become Orwellian, that the changes are positive, and that efforts made are acknowledged and appreciated. I think that sometimes people can get really caught up in change, and if the change isn't made exactly as they envisioned it, they go on the attack. And people do really want to help and facilitate in any way that they can, but sometimes they need guidance, sometimes they need resource, and I don't think you should be vilified for that. I know that, as a woman, it's always really interesting. Men always say, well, how do I need to behave? Should I say this? Is this wrong? Is this bad? And I hear a lot of, it's not my job to educate you on that. I'm like, absolutely, it's not my job, but it's my privilege and it's my obligation for future generations. And I would much rather help guide you than to watch you flail for the next, offend people for the next couple of years until you figure it out on your own, if you ever figure it out on your own. I don't get offended by that. I'm happy to do it.
Nice. I have a
little game I like to play at the airline, where if a male pilot says or does something that is so beyond the bounds of professionalism, I use my excellent mime skills like this and go, hello, HR. That's how they know. And then they have to buy me a latte.
Is that for real?
Yep. And not a grande one, a venti.
Good for you. Wow. What a subtle yet powerful HR. Two syllables, and you get a vente. Boom, like that. That's what I'm talking about. You're badass. You're just making things happen. I love it.
But again, it's using humor instead of guilting or lambasting. They think it's funny, and then it impacts more. It resonates more. There's one gentleman I flew with. You have to do a flight control test in the plane before you take off, where they have to move the flight controls every which way. And this gentleman, when he was ready to do the flight control test, yelled out, "Watch your boobies." Hello, HR. And that's pretty much typical for the kind of thing I have to deal with on a regular basis.
Watch your boobies.
Watch your boobies. Yeah.
Man, pilots, they're just like every other man.
That one was a mochaccino. That one, I got a mochaccino.
we're gonna need a whole carafe here.
And a cronut. Thank you.
What
By
are
the time I finish educating these men, I'm going to be so fat.
and they'll still respect your body for it
That's
because
right.
you'll have taught them. Because it's not about my looks, gentlemen.
That's
Keep
right.
it coming.
It's up here. Look up here. Look up here.
My brain is. I think it's here. All right. What can we plug for you? What do you work? What do you have? Any sketches, websites? Where can people see you?
You know what I've been doing? Because I've been flying up until about the last 2 weeks ago, flying medical personnel and supplies and things like that.
Oh, wow.
And now they've grounded most of our planes. So I have to go back into training on a smaller aircraft. They're thinking might be more financially feasible at the end of July. So I have been dying. I've written some things for TV, and I got tired of trying to pitch things because they were going nowhere, and it's frustrating. So I am 142 pages into a book.
Congratulations.
That I'm writing. Yeah, and it's called The Line Holder, and it's about a woman's experience in the aviation industry. It's fiction.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I'm hoping I can knock that out almost as in its entirety before I go back into training, because then my time will be stressful and and accounted for the next couple months. And I'm hoping when Second City opens again, I was doing a student improv show that I loved called Historical Improv that I'm hoping I can start up again once the theater reopens.
Oh yeah, it feels like a zillion years ago now. I
Doesn't
forgot
it,
about Historical Improv. Tell me again what the premise of that show is.
So one of the things I always love to teach my students is the more knowledge you have and the larger your frame of reference for different subject areas, the better an improviser you'll be. And I was really noticing that students were not particularly well referenced with respect to historical events or different periods in history, which you'd often ask for as a suggestion, right? In games, give me a period in history. And I remember the exact moment that I decided the show would be necessary and welcome. Someone got Vietnam as a suggestion, the Vietnam War. And they started their scene by choking on some mustard gas. So I thought, you know what? There's an opportunity here. For entertainment and education.
For anyone who's confused, mustard gas was famously used in World War II, not in Vietnam. That was Agent Orange. Or World War I even. Oh, wow. So see, even I didn't even get it right? So like so that's 2 wars off, at least. But
I was also impressed that, and part of me went, okay, cool, they know about mustard gas, so it's been, imprinted in their memory from reading or watching something. So that's cool. We just need to
calibrate it, right? Clearly, I need to as well.
Context for it. So historical improv show, hit show is what it's called. Every show takes place in a different year in history, and it's really fun. It's a mix of students and alumni. And students the students that are in the audience put their names in a hat, and if we draw their name out, then they come up on stage and improvise with us in that year in history. And the beginning of the show is a sort of a talk show chat about what's hot in 1964 or whatever the year is, so that they have some reference, so they're not they're not burdened with having to do all this research before they show up for the show. And we usually wear epoch era costumes and things. It's really fun. It was really, really, really fun to do. I really, really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, whenever we get back to being around human beings again, I look forward to that starting back up. So we'll be on the lookout for your book and your show. Lauren, thanks so much for being on this show. Really appreciate it. You're such a great teacher, and you've affected so many people, and you've got so much to learn from. It's just an honor to talk to you.
Oh, right back at you, Rich. Absolutely. You're such a lovely guy.
Bless you.
You would never tell me to watch my boobies.
I don't think I've ever said that phrase. And here's the only time I could see myself using that phrase is if I was writing some piece of fiction and there was
about someone, a misogynistic pilot,
and there was someone in who was like, I've got an idea for a comedy show called Watch My Boobies, and like we're making fun of how bad that person is at comedy. That would be the only way I could.
Well, I think perhaps that might be the greatest gift that improv and comedy has given me. It's kept me out of prison for the entirety of my life so far. So you really can't set the bar much higher than that, can you?
Yeah, rather than kill someone, I can just do a joke, and then I don't go to jail. Everyone's better for it.
I will slay you with my wit, and that's with a W.
Nice. Laura McGhee, thanks so much for being on the Improv Breakdown.
Thanks so much, Rich. Take care, love.
Thank you so much for watching. So between the time we recorded this interview and now, Laura published her book. She called her shot. I love it when creators do that. So you can find everything about her book or her web series, which she didn't plug. Come on, Laura. She made a web series. It's awesome. You can find that all on her website, which is ladypilot.com, lady-pilot. If you're interested in learning more about my private coaching, my classes, or my workshops, follow me at Rich Baker Coaching on Instagram or Facebook, or get on my email list, which is all that info is in the show notes below. If you have any questions about improv, please put them in the comments below. I'm going to do a Q&A episode for my 11th episode, and I would love to answer your question. Thanks for sticking with me this far. To get notified about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Roland and Rich's YouTube channel and click the little bell icon below. Thanks, improvisers, and keep making each other look good.